Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? Today we're diving into the world of Charlie Munger and his unique approach to, well, pretty much everything it seems. Life, business, investing, you name it. We're cracking open poor Charlie's Almanack, which, by the way, is quite a read.
It is. It's packed with insights. And what's fascinating is how much Munger's early life shaped his thinking.
Oh, absolutely. It's like his childhood was tailor-made for a guy who champions multidisciplinary thinking. I mean, picture this. Young Munger, instead of, comic books, he's devouring biographies. And get this, medical journals, too.
And not just reading them, but captivated by surgeries.
Surgeries. Seriously, that's a bit intense for a kid. What was it about surgeries that fascinated him so much?
It was the intersection of skill, knowledge, and recognizing that even with the best surgeon, outcomes aren't always guaranteed. There's this element of statistics and probability. He was already thinking about risk and decision-making in a very unique way, even then.
Wow, talk about early influences. It's no wonder he emphasizes mental models from diverse fields.
Exactly. This early exposure to different disciplines planted the seeds for his multidisciplinary approach. It wasn't just about accumulating knowledge, but about building frameworks to understand the world.
So he was already building those mental frameworks, those mental models, as he calls them, early on. And he actually credits his diverse reading, even as a young child, with helping him develop this way of thinking. From devouring medical journals as a teen to later dissecting businesses, Munger's approach was always about connecting diverse ideas.
Absolutely. He wasn't just reading within the lines, he was looking for the patterns across different fields. And this theme continues throughout his life.
Instead of just accumulating knowledge, he was building these mental frameworks to understand the world. So, how did this all begin?
Well, he wasn't born into wealth and privilege, if that's what you mean. Munger grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. But what's interesting is, even as a young boy, he had this insatiable curiosity and a knack for observation. And his family background, while not financially extraordinary, did expose him to intellectual influences.
Like his dad's friend, Dr. Davis, right? I read that Munger spent a lot of time at their house observing Dr. Davis, who was a skilled surgeon.
Exactly. It wasn't your typical after-school hangout. Imagine a young Munger, captivated by surgeries, fascinated by the precision, the life-or-death decisions, the intersection of skill and statistical outcomes. He was absorbing it all.
That's not your average childhood reading list. Most kids are trying to avoid anything remotely medical. It sounds like this early exposure to the diverse fields really shaped his multidisciplinary approach.
Absolutely. You see this theme throughout his life. From devouring medical journals as a teen to later dissecting businesses, Munger's approach was always about connecting diverse ideas. He wasn't just reading within the lines. He was looking for the patterns across different fields.
So instead of just accumulating knowledge, he was building these mental frameworks, these mental models, as he calls them, to understand the world. And we see this even in his high school years at Central High School in Omaha. He was clearly a bright kid, excelled academically. But then there's this other side to him. Did you know he was on the rifle team?
I did. Quite a contrast, isn't it? The future intellectual giant, comfortable with both books and, well, firearms, shows a certain versatility, don't you think?
It does. And, it's funny. He had this sort of self-deprecating humor about his time on the rifle team. He described himself as having a large letter on a very small chest, referring to his Letterman sweater.
He never took himself too seriously, even with his obvious intellect. But on a more serious note, it's important to acknowledge that Munger's life wasn't without his share of hardship.
Right, like the tragic loss of his first wife and then later the loss of his son. Those experiences must have had a profound impact on his outlook.
Absolutely. It's impossible to say for sure how those events shaped him, but it's clear that he developed a certain resilience, a sense of perspective that likely influenced his approach to risk and decision-making later on.
It makes you think about the complexities of life, how personal tragedies can shape even the most brilliant minds. But even with those hardships, his drive for knowledge and understanding never wavered. Okay, I'm hooked. So what clicked? What did he discover?
This is where his collaboration with Warren Buffett really comes into play.
Ah, the dynamic duo.
Right. Buffett, while also influenced by Graham, had started to focus on the quality of the business, not just the price tag.
So instead of just hunting for bargains, he was looking for companies with a solid foundation, something built to last.
Precisely. He realized that a great business, even if priced at a premium, could offer far greater returns in the long run. Think of it like this. Would you rather buy a slightly dented, discounted car with a questionable engine, or a slightly used but reliable car at a fair price?
That analogy makes perfect sense. It's about understanding the intrinsic value, the long-term potential, rather than just chasing a fleeting discount.
Exactly. And this is where his lattice work of mental models really shines. He began applying insights from other disciplines to evaluate businesses.
Okay, give me an example. How does that work in practice?
Let's say he's looking at a company. He might use principles of competitive advantage from biology. Analyzing a company's moat, like an ecologist studies a species niche.
So he's not just looking at the numbers, he's looking at the whole ecosystem a business operates in.
Yes, and he might draw upon history, understanding how similar businesses have fared during different economic cycles, or use physics principles to grasp the dynamics of a particular market. It's his multi-layered analysis that sets him apart.
This is blowing my mind. It's like he's upgraded from a magnifying glass to this incredible multi-lens microscope when evaluating businesses.
And this brings us to another crucial element of Munger's approach: his emphasis on understanding human psychology.
Oh, psychology, I'm all ears.
He's fascinated by how our brains can trick us, especially in investing, leading to irrational decision.
Oh, I can relate to that. We've all made those impulse purchases we later regretted. But how does this play out in the world of investing?
Think about the psychological bias of social proof. Imagine a hot new stock everyone is raving about.
Oh yeah, been there, done that.
Right. We might feel this urge to jump on board, afraid of missing out, even if we don't fully understand the underlying business.
It's that fear of missing out, the FOMO, that gets us every time.
Exactly. And Munger warns against this. He stresses the importance of independent thinking, of not getting swept up in the hype. Remember the circle of competence we talked about?
Right, sticking to what you know and understand.
That applies here too. Don't let social pressure push you outside your circle of competence.
Makes sense. So what other psychological traps do we need to watch out for?
Another bias he highlights is contrast misreaction. It's how our perception is skewed by comparisons.
Okay, I need an example for that one. How does that play out in investing?
Imagine you're analyzing two companies in the same industry. One has mind-blowing growth, while the other shows moderate but steady growth. We might be tempted to dismiss the steady one as boring, even if its fundamentals are stronger. Our perception is skewed by the contrast.
So it's like those optical illusions where the same color looks different depending on the surrounding colors. Our brain plays tricks on us.
Precisely. Munger argues that recognizing these biases, these common errors in thinking, is crucial for making sound judgments.
It's like he's saying, know thyself, right? Understand your own mental biases to make clearer decisions.
Exactly. Now let's move from the psychological to the personal. Munger is a firm believer in ethical conduct, not just as a moral imperative, but as a cornerstone of sustainable success. He argues that cutting corners might bring temporary gains, but will ultimately erode trust and value.
So it's not just about playing the game, it's about playing it with integrity.
Absolutely. He emphasizes building a reputation for honesty and fairness. He believes this fosters stronger relationships and ultimately leads to better outcomes in the long run.
This resonates with me. It's like building a house. You can't cut corners on the foundation and expect it to stand the test of time.
Exactly. For Munger, ethics and integrity are not just personal values. They are strategic advantages in business and life.
This is incredibly insightful. But I have to ask, with all his success, how does Munger approach learning? What's his attitude towards knowledge? This is incredibly insightful. But I have to ask, with all his success, how does Munger approach learning? What's his attitude towards knowledge?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of Munger's philosophy. He's a voracious reader, a lifelong learner. He believes that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know you know.
Yeah, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Exactly. And this drives him to constantly seek out new information, refine his understanding. He's constantly challenging his own assumptions, seeking out different perspectives.
So it's about staying curious, staying open to new ideas, even late in life.
Absolutely. And remember that lattice work of mental models we talked about. Well, he believes in building that throughout your life, continually adding new tools and frameworks to your mental toolbox.
And this idea of a lattice work really stands out. It's not just about being a jack of all trades, knowing a little about everything. It's about seeing the connections between things, right?
Precisely. It's about synthesizing knowledge from diverse fields, understanding how different disciplines intersect and inform each other. This allows you to approach problems with a more holistic and nuanced perspective.
This is so inspiring. It's like he's saying, don't be afraid to venture outside your comfort zone, to be a student of the world. But for someone listening who's thinking, that's great for Charlie Munger, but how do I apply this in my own life? what would you say?
I'd say start by cultivating curiosity in your everyday life. Don't just accept things at face value, ask why. Read widely, explore different subjects, even if they seem unrelated to your immediate interests.
So if I'm passionate about, say, history, I shouldn't shy away from picking up a book on psychology or economics.
Exactly. You never know what connections you might find. Maybe a historical event can be better understood through the lens of economic forces or human behavior. It's about building those mental bridges between disciplines.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. So if we had to distill Charlie Munger's wisdom into a few key takeaways for our listeners, what would those be?
Firstly, embrace a multidisciplinary approach to life and learning. Cultivate that latticework of mental models by drawing from various fields. Secondly, always strive to act with integrity. It's not just ethically sound, it's a powerful strategy for long-term success. And lastly, never stop learning. The world is full of fascinating connections waiting to be discovered.
So, to wrap things up, it's not just about mimicking Charlie Munger's investment strategies. It's about adopting his mindset, a relentless curiosity, a commitment to ethical conduct, and a dedication to lifelong learning. And on that note, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Charlie Munger. We'll catch you next time, same place. Until then, keep those mental models sharp.